Okay, before we get started with the music, I just need you guys to listen to this intro. That is awesome. This is Remoat Stadium from Pokemon Unite. And you might be asking yourself, why am I playing music from Pokemon Unite? Well, for one, it's good music. And for two, Machamp, for a brief moment, was one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. It's fallen a little bit out of favor for me, but it was at one point one of my favorites because it was my main in Pokemon Unite. When that game first came out, I just played the absolute crap out of it. I would get on with my friends. One of my friends, he liked to play, well, he played a lot of different Pokemon, but he liked to play Eldegoss. And Eldegoss plus Machamp on the bottom lane, oh my god, we got so much progress done. I had a game where I achieved a 99 score, and I think I had like 45 kills. And keep in mind, this is a 10-minute time limit for this game. So, like, that was insane. Like, I don't think that was the most kills I've ever got. I think I've gotten over 50 with Machamp in a game. But, like, Jesus, this Mon was so fun to play with in that game. But, in any case, I've spent a whole minute at the start here, or even longer than that, talking about Machamp in Pokemon Unite. Did you think you would get that out of Tetrafolium? No, because I'm full of surprises. But this is Machamp ADV's one Mon army, also a one Mon army in Pokemon Unite back in the day. I don't know what the meta is like now. I have not played it probably in, what, 3-4 years? Has it been 4 years already? That's crazy. So yeah. In any case, here's the viability rankings. Machamp does make an appearance down here at number 48. Can we just give a shout out to how well represented the fighting types are on the VR? You have, obviously, Heracross, Medicham, and Breloom up in the D tier or higher. Medicham now, of course, is an OU Pokemon, but you still have Blaziken, Hariyama, and Machamp down in the E rank, so like they're still getting some love, and frankly, a lot of people say that these fighting types are underrated. Some people would argue for Hariyama in OU. I go back and forth on that. I tend to think it's not quite good enough. But some people will even say like Blaziken and Machamp are like much higher borderline than you think, or that most people think. And I can see the reason why. Fighting types are actually really solid in this generation. So my question for you guys today is, who's your favorite fighting type to use in ADV? For me, it's probably Heracross now. I used to be really big on Medicham, and I still like a good Medicham team, but like Heracross has a little bit more defensive utility, and that Megahorn is so strong. But honestly, I would have guessed that Machamp would have been my least favorite to use, but after playing around with the team that I'm going to show you guys in towards the end of this video, like my whole tune has changed, and I'm now no longer a Machamp hater. But I have to go back to my Machamp hater roots and talk about all the fighting types of this great tier here. And yes, Machamp is there with a solid base 130 attack at 55 speed. But as a reference to my Heracross video, of course we have to be mad and take him out here. But just briefly going over this, while Breloom has the highest attack stat of all these five, of course it's tied with Machamp as we saw previously. It is a little bit lower than Medicham when you factor in Medicham's ability, Pure Power. Technically speaking, it is a passive. It just exists at all times, so it's probably more accurate to think about Medicham in terms of this ability modifiers row here. Whereas I do have the ability modifiers when Heracross and Hariyama have their respective abilities procced, mostly Guts, but also in the case of your good old boy Heracross, your Swarm. Although I think technically Swarm boosts the damage of the bug type moves, but effectively it's about the same as giving you a 1.5 times attack boost. I think there's like some slight differences in rounding that don't get accounted for if you think about it exactly in that way, but I digress. Of course, neither Blaziken nor Breloom have abilities that sort of synergize well with their fighting type. Blaziken does have Blaze, which boosts its special attack, or specifically when it's using fire type moves, but that's not really going to help its argument for being a great physical attacker, although it is a pretty good physical attacker. And then the speed here. None of the fighting types are particularly like very fast, but Heracross at 85 is pretty respectable. 85 in this generation is kind of like your base like 100 to 110 in future generations. If you're somehow watching this and you're more familiar with modern generations than you are with ADV. But in any case, 85 pretty good. But let's get more in depth with Machamp here. Machamp has the same attack stat as Breloom, and I'll just remind you here. The left number is what it is if you have 252 EVs with no plus nature, and then to the right is if you're a plus nature. So in the case of Machamp, it's pretty much always going to be adamant. There's not really much of a case to use special attacks on Machamp, though. It is a Gen 1 Pokemon, so it does get access to some very strange elemental moves that maybe have an application somewhere, but probably not, because Machamp has a really, really crap special attack stat. You're probably just better off going for fighting type moves against, say, like Steels that you'd be hitting with fire. Or honestly, you're just better off going for fighting type moves into the water types too. Instead of going for something weird like Thunder, if it even gets that. I'm not sure, but it is Gen 1, so I assume it does. Then, defensively speaking, Machamp is pretty similar to Heracross, so I have their whole spreads here. Not too long ago, I did ask in a poll, or not a poll, like a quiz, which fighting type has the highest BST. And that is because I was doing a little bit of research on that for this video, and it was a little bit surprising to me that Blaziken was actually the one that has the highest BST. I would have guessed Machamp, honestly, and Heracross would have been a reasonable guess as well, but I guess Blaziken's got that starter privilege. But if you look at this, Heracross has a little bit of additional special defense. That 10 extra special defense is pretty notable, but Machamp has a little bit more physical defense and a little bit more HP. And what this kind of evens out to being is that Machamp is a good bit better at taking physical hits than Heracross, but Heracross is slightly better at taking special hits because, you know, HP and the other stats scale a little bit differently. So in fact, your defenses matter a slight bit more than your HP, at least like the base stat. The raw stats, essentially, you know the damage formula, and if you don't, then it doesn't really matter. But just take my word for it. Heracross is slightly better at taking special hits. Machamp is a decent bit better at taking physical hits. Not by a whole lot, though. And Machamp's speed of 55 is a little bit faster than Hariyama, who's at base 50, but it's notably slower than the rest of your fighting types. And then just to get a sort of gauge of what that raw speed stat looks like for both of these two, at 252 speed investment, Machamp will hit 209, which is honestly not terrible. You're faster than something like a Jolly Marowak without even having to have the plus speed nature. Like, that's notable. I don't know if I would say that it's all that great, though, because you're going to need a plus speed nature to outspeed an Adamant Tyranitar. That's not fantastic. Now, Hariyama can't even do that if the Tyranitar is opting to run 252 speed EVs. So, you know, at least you have that as an option for Machamp, but I would say, generally speaking, that it's probably not that worth it to go that fast with Machamp. A plus speed nature on Machamp is usually just not worth it for you. We're gonna put on some Pokemon Ranger music now. Hopefully this will carry us through. You guys play Pokemon Ranger? I think it's a pretty underrated spin-off series. Granted, I don't like clamor to go back to play it myself, but I mean, it was fun the times that I have played it. So this is from Shadows of Almia, of course. In any case, we're moving on. Machamp rips through some common structures, and what I mean by common structures is like your big three, in a sense. Being Tyranitar, Skarmory, and Blissey. Now, we can have arguments about whether or not those are the top 3 Pokemon in the tier, but they are the 3 Pokemon that are the most demanding on the team builder, I should say. If you don't have means to deal with Skarmory, then you're going to get spiked on and you're going to get toxicked on. If you don't have means to deal with Blissey, then you're just going to lose. Like, you can't just muscle through Blissey with special attacks. And Tyranitar, with its sand and its enormous stats and Dragon Dance and all that, is also quite dangerous. But Machamp is pretty good into all 3 of these in certain contexts. Unless Tyranitar has really high speed investment, like nearly 252, Machamp can outspeed it with some investment of its own. And Machamp can afford to run some speed. Like I said, you probably don't want to do a plus speed nature, but 252 speed on Machamp is not unreasonable. And that is going to outspeed pretty much all of the Tyranitar spreads that you would see, other than the ones that basically do 252 speed. Which unfortunately means that you wouldn't outspeed like an adamant 252 speed Tyranitar, but like I think you're okay with that, because modest Fire Blast from say like your Pursuit or your Mixed Tar is not even going to 2-hit KO Machamp. Even if Machamp has no HP or special defense investment, and frankly, you're not that scared of a burn because you're just going to get a Guts boost for it, which means that you're super duper going to kill Tyranitar back with a fighting type move. And then Jolly Earthquake from Tyranitar will not 2-hit KO an uninvested Machamp either. Adamant does have rolls to get there, but of course, you could run some HP or defense investment and overcome that sort of issue if you're that worried about it, which, you know, also quite reasonable. Machamp benefits a decent amount from some defensive investment because it is a pretty bulky guy, so good to know. Although I would say the sort of bulk that it sits at is more so, you're more so going to be interested in looking at like some stronger moves that might OHKO Machamp, or moves that are doing like in the 75-ish% range, so that you can EV out of range of that plus spikes damage, or that plus or if it's like threatening an OHKO to an uninvested Machamp, then maybe you can get out of OHKO range. So that's the sort of idea there with Machamp, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future slides. In any case, Machamp and Blissey naturally speed tie, but Machamp can usually afford to run more speed than Blissey would do. There are some exceptions. Mono Blissey, which is like a Blissey that only has one attacking move, which is generally Seismic Toss, can afford to run a lot of speed if it wants to. I've done, and I think I've shown on this channel, Blissey sets that have something like Seismic Toss, Wish, Soft-Boiled, Sing. And Sing is really nice if you can be really fast, like faster than Skarmory. You can get the Sing off, and then that can potentially stop the opponent from getting hazards. You know, you have to hit the Sing, and you have to get a good number of sleep turns, obviously, but like that's pretty big. And obviously, you're not getting that much for investing in special attack on a Seismic Toss Blissey. And many people would go for max HP, but in reality, that doesn't help you that much against a lot of the roles that you think it would. It's not so bad into physical attacks, but like if you look at the roles for special attacks, like the difference between 0 HP investment and max HP investment is we're literally talking like 2% damage, which is not that consequential in all seriousness. But you can do a little bit of HP investment, but you can do a lot of speed investment, and Blissey can get some use out of that. But Machamp can usually go faster than Blissey will. Like say if you're gonna go 252 speed on Machamp, Blissey is very rarely gonna go that fast. So you can sort of guarantee that you're gonna outspeed Blissey, or virtually guarantee that you're gonna outspeed Blissey. And then a cross chop from a max attack adamant Machamp will guarantee an OHKO on Bold Blissey, which is kind of crazy because, like, you think about how strong Cross Chop is and how strong Machamp is with a super effective hit onto Blissey's poor defense stat, and that is just barely enough to get the OHKO on Blissey. Like, it's literally just so perfect that if you took 4 EVs out of Machamp's attack move pool there, it is technically not a guaranteed OHKO on Blissey. If you get the minimum roll, you would fail to OHKO the Blissey, which is kind of insane, right? But all the more reason that we would like to use Machamp to smash on Bold Blissey. It's going to give you a better chance to do so than even Breloom, who you would think Breloom just straight up kills Blissey, but that's not actually the case if it's a Bold Blissey. If it's modest, then yeah, you're going to kill it. But kind of consequential too, because you don't want to take an Ice Beam with Breloom. In any case, though, they're crying. These two, Tyranitar and Blissey, that brings them to tears. But what about the other of the big three, Skarmory? So Skarmory's Drill Peck will deal over half to an uninvested Machamp, and Machamp doesn't quite 2-hit KO with Cross Chop. So in theory, Skarmory's actually pretty good into Machamp, but if Machamp is running Bulk Up, then you will survive an additional Drill Peck and get the 2-hit KO. So that means that in a one-on-one situation, if your Machamp is faster than Skarmory, which you can afford to run faster than Skarmory in a lot of cases, you can go for Bulk Up with your Machamp. You're a 3-hit KO now from Drill Peck, and then you will 2-hit KO the Skarmory with Cross Chop. So as long as you're willing to risk it with the accuracy, you can beat Skarmory one-on-one with Machamp if you have Bulk Up. I also want to mention that if Skarmory doesn't have Drill Peck, its only move to target you is Toxic. Well, that's just going to give you a Guts boost. And while Guts boost +1 doesn't quite OHKO Skarmory, it's going to do a lot of damage, and there are not very many Pokemon that would love to switch into that type of move. Even the resists, like your Zapdos or something, are going to be afraid of the increased critical hit chance for Cross Chop, because effectively a +2 Machamp, because +1 and then the Guts boost. Actually, that's not true. It's not effectively +2. It's actually a little stronger than that. But I digress. You're like, what, 2.25 times? That, with a critical hit, even if you are resisting, you're going to take a lot of damage. So, yeah, that can be really nice for your Skarmory prospects there. But, of course, if you're not running Bulk Up, then that sort of option is not as available to you. You might need to have some more defense investment so that you can survive 2 Drill Pecks. you may want to also do something kind of with, I don't know really what you could do if you're not running bulk up to do more damage. Focus Punch, of course, would 2-hit KO Skarmory, but like if it has Drill Peck, and why is it not going to click Drill Peck into the Machamp? So keep that in mind. So versus your common Tar, Skarm, Bliss teams, the structures that you would tend to see here, Machamp is not so bad into the other Pokemon that commonly get paired here. So let's take a look at Big 5 and V5, which are two teams that you should be familiar with if you're getting into ADV. And if you're not familiar with these teams, then I hope that this is going to familiarize you a little bit, but you should definitely do a little bit more research on them. Machamp is generally going to 2-hit KO an offensive Swampert and would avoid a 2-hit KO from a defensive Swampert. So, yeah, you don't quite... The thing is, offensive Pert will 2-hit KO Machamp, but you'll 2-hit KO it, and defensive Pert will generally not get 2-hit KO'd, but you generally won't 2-hit KO it. So, depending on the sort of situation, maybe if you have a lot of spikes damage down, or if you got some damage on Swampert before, then Machamp can afford to try to trade into the Swampert, but, you know, just do it at your own discretion. Offensive Gengar is usually going to be O-code by Hidden Power Ghost. It's not a guarantee straight up. I think it's like 87% of the time that you'll get there. But defensive Gengar, who should live your HP Ghost pretty easily, is going to deal a maximum of 37% with T-Bolt, which is like that's not good. I can't recall if that's just with no HP investment or SPDEF investment or anything like that, but like that's not much. So you're actually pretty good into Gengar if you have HP Ghost. If you opt to run HP Bug instead, then all of a sudden you're not so good into Gengar. Well, Rock Slide does a decent amount, but not quite enough to really scare the Gengar. So yeah, and then also you don't have to worry about Will-O-Wisp because you have Guts. If they give you a Guts boost, you're just gonna kill them. So yeah. And then Zapdos. So your Rock Slide is generally going to 2-hit KO Zapdos, and you can survive a modest T-Bolt with not very much investment. So that's good to know if you need to trade into the Zapdos for any reason. Also keep in mind that if Zapdos goes for Thunder Wave, again, you're getting the Guts boost, you're going to kill the Zapdos most of the time. So yeah, it's actually not so bad for this matchup. Of course, Big 5 can run a lot of different Pokemon as the last. You could run Starmie instead. Starmie is a little bit better into Machamp, but it does take a lot of damage from HP Ghost as well. So that kind of actually, if you run into Beer Lover, which is Big 5 with Starmie instead of Zapdos here, you don't have to click that much Rock Slide, which is kind of good. You're already relying on Cross Chop as a inaccurate move to begin with. Having to rely on Rock Slide as well is not ideal, but cutting that out is kind of good because you can click a lot of HP Ghost as the mid-ground for a lot of these guys. All the Pokemon that would switch into HP Ghost do not want to take a Cross Chop, other than like maybe Swampert. So yeah, keep that in mind. V5, it's a little bit more of a defensive style team. Some would call it stall. I think it depends on what your sixth is. In this case, we're looking at Tyranitar V5. It's pretty common. But you will also see like Metagross, Dusclops. You might even see Suicune doubling up on the water types. I've run Registeel and shown that off in a video. So like there are a lot of things that you can do there, but Tyranitar is one of the more common ones, and against this team, obviously you do well into the big three, but Milotic, you'll deal 44% maximum with a Surf from Milotic into an uninvested Machamp. And then +1 Machamp will 2-hit KO the Milotic with Cross Chop. So it's not bad, and Machamp can... If it's not running any sort of HP or SPDEF investment, it's probably running a lot of speed, which means that it's faster than Milotic. So you can do the same sort of idea against that you did with the Skarmory, where you bulk up And then you just take your 2 cross chops into the Milotic. If you manage to land, you will kill Milotic before it kills you. So keep that in mind. HP Ghost is going to deal 75% minimum to the utility Claydol set. And Claydol is often going to fail to 2-hit KO an HP invested Machamp with Psychic. Now, if you have no HP investment, then yeah, you might get 2-hit KO'd. And when Sand is involved, the rolls are definitely more so in Claydol's favor, but if you ever find yourself in a scenario where you have a really high HP Machamp or like a Spadef invested Machamp, then you're not that scared really of Psychic from Claydol, or not as scared as you would initially think you should be. So it's not bad. You could try to run a set that is like a counter Claydol with your, or counter to Claydol with your Machamp. Like run 189 speed and then put the rest, like obviously max attack, and then put the rest into Spadef, and that could actually be really good at smoking the Claydol. With that sort of idea, I think that there's a good argument for HP Bug, because you might be able to get some utility against Celebi with that type of set. But I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with what you can do with Machamp here. But keep that in mind if you're ever like scared of Claydol. Machamp can sort of spec to win that matchup. And then Machamp is going to survive and KO an Adamant Dugtrio from full. So that being both ways. If you're at full, you're going to take like, I think somewhere like 82% maximum if you're uninvested against the Dugtrio. And then your cross chop is just going to, like, you're going to kill Dugtrio. I guess in theory, if a Dugtrio is running enough bulk to live something crazy like an Earthquake from Adamant Tyranitar or something like that, then maybe they have rolls to survive Machamp's cross chop, but generally speaking, you can bet that Machamp is going to one-shot Dugtrio. If you're using cross chop, of course. But the barriers to success, Machamp is pretty good at trading into key Pokemon like Tyranitar and Gengar, but it doesn't have recovery to sustain its health through multiple interactions. So what that means, basically, is that Spice and Sand are going to be really problematic for a Machamp who wants to do more than just trade into one Pokemon. So that's a little bit of a sigh of relief for Skarmory and Tyranitar, because while they're not super duper consistent at 1v1ing Machamp, in particular Tyranitar, they can still get some value against the Machamp by just setting their Sand and setting their Spikes, and then switching out. So kind of good news if you're a Machamp hater. And then Machamp's lower speed makes it kind of difficult to find entry points on Revenge. So think about these Pokemon like Gyarados and Salamence, who, if you could just get in and outspeed them and hit them with a fat Rock Slide, then they wouldn't be so, they would not be laughing right now. But because they're just so much faster than Machamp naturally, they don't even have to run very much speed investment, and they're just going to outspeed Machamp, and then they're going to get their super effective HP flyings off, and that's not cool. So yeah, I guess I should also mention that Machamp really likes to run Cross Chop to get a lot of the ranges that it needs, because it's, you know, just a stronger fighting type move. But Cross Chop only has 80% accuracy, so you will miss with it a good chunk of the time. Brick Break, of course, is an option for Machamp, but it doesn't quite get certain kills. Like, for example, Blissey. If you're up against Bold Blissey, Brick Break usually is not going to kill a Bold Blissey, even if you're max attack Adamant, which is kind of incredible. Let's actually get I'm pulling the calc up just to see exactly where we're at with that. So Brick Break into Blissey, who's got a bold nature. Yeah, in fact, you do 75% to 88. That's actually ridiculous. So that means that if Blissey's modest, in fact, if Blissey's modest, you will not kill it straight up with Brick Break, which is that's not ideal. Now, yeah, doing 82 to 96% to modest Blissey is certainly really good to have. It's not going to be able to soft boil loop you, that's for sure. But like, it's a little bit disappointing, frankly, that you don't quite kill with that. So yeah, Metachamp supremacy. But yeah, that's maybe another thing I could mention here. But I think we're kind of accepting that when we're using Machamp, that we're gonna be okay with a little bit of inconsistency. But what if we make it a little inconsistent for our opponents? And that's the second question to ask after, how do we get more value with our Machamp while it's in? And the answer is going to be Paraspam. Okay, that's not to say that Machamp only works on Paraspam teams. That's like not at all what I'm saying here. But I am saying that Paraspam is a really good route to help Machamp achieve like the dominating status that it probably deserves to have, because it's just a cool guy in Pokemon Unite, of course. Paralysis will reduce an afflicted Pokemon's speed to 1/4 of its usual value. So take, for example, Milotic. If it had a raw 200 speed, which, I mean, that means it's got, what, 8 EVs of investment? That would be effectively a 50 speed Pokemon when it's paralyzed. So things like your Dusclops, which has ridiculously low speed, is going to outspeed Milotic if it's paralyzed. Famously, something like Aerodactyl sitting at 394, if it's paralyzed, it goes down to effectively 98 speed, which means that Snorlax with simply 12 speed EVs will outspeed Aerodactyl if the Aerodactyl is paralyzed. So it's really good to know. That means that a lot of Pokemon who fall into this sort of archetype here of high attack and low speed can get a lot of benefit out of paralysis being spread around. So I have this graphic on the screen. If you're not looking at it, it's okay. You can kind of visualize that left and right we have Pokemon's speed values, and up and down we have their attack values. And I'm specifically looking at physical attackers with this one. The reason being is that special attackers generally don't have as many speed issues. Most of them are actually pretty fast. Think about things like Celebi, Jirachi, Suicune, Moltres, Zapdos. Like, they're all pretty fast. There are some exceptions, of course. I mean, certainly there are some pretty fast physical attackers as well. Like, you'll see on screen Slacking, Flygon, Salamence all the way to the right with 100 speed. Pretty solid, but they're obviously not. There are obviously not that many physical attackers who have speed stats that high. Like, the next fastest after that would be Heracross, who's sitting at like 85. So, which is decent, but it's kind of whatever. So in any case, the Pokemon in this sort of red box here, who are more on the slower side, are going to be the ones that tend to benefit from paralysis support. That being because they can run a lot of attack stat and then come in and outspeed something that is paralyzed and then just smash them with a really strong physical attack. Now, some of these Pokemon are a little bit more effective than others. Banette, like, okay, it's got 115 attack. That's not bad, but like, are you going to be running Paraspam support so that Banette can get its decent attacks off on Pokemon? Like, I don't know if I would go that far. Swampert, yeah, I mean, Swampert's got more defensive utility. It's a little bit more okay with just simply trading rather than relying on outspeeding. But certain Pokemon on this line here, like maybe your Regirock or Aggron or Machamp, Ursaring, Rhydon, Snorlax, obviously up at the top there, Marowak, really, really like to have that kind of support so that they can go for their really strong attacks and not have to worry about just being outsped and eventually beat down. Um, Here's a sort of list of para spreaders. Most of these Pokemon are going to spread paralysis through Thunder Wave, although notably Pokemon like Jirachi and Snorlax tend to do it through Body Slam. Miltank can do it either way. I mean, technically Jirachi gets Thunder Wave as well, but I don't tend to see a lot of people running Thunder Wave on Jirachi. I guess 60% is a reasonable risk to take there, but some of these Pokemon are going to work a little better at spamming Para than others. Things like your Zapdos and Tyranitar and Gyarados, honestly, are pretty bulky and can get multiple Thunder Waves off in a game. Starmie is skirting that line, especially because it has Recover. Whereas things like Jolteon, you're probably going to paralyze one thing. You're probably not getting that many more paralysis in the game. In particular, I guess you could come in on Revenge and go for a T-Wave, but that's not necessarily the highest value thing that you can do with a Revenge Killer. So, although it can be pretty high value if you have a lot of Pokemon that rely on that paralysis support. But we also have some UUBL Pokemon that are pretty notable, like Dragonite, like Regirock, like Porygon 2. Some of these Pokemon kind of facilitate their own para spam support, like Dragonite and Regirock, who don't mind that for their, like, you know, they have pretty high attacks. They're pretty good wall breakers. Regirock a little less so than Dragonite, but they can kind of support themselves. But Porygon 2, Registeel, Regice, they're also pretty good at doing that. And we should mention that doesn't, like, this graphic of Pokemon is not, they're not the only Pokemon that like para spam. Something like Registeel, for example, could get some value out of a para spam team. It can go for Curse and still outspeed some things after Curse boosts, or the speed debuff from Curse in particular. So that could be nice. It also gives you more turns to set up with certain Pokemon. And then, of course, you know, special attackers who like to do like Calm Mind spam don't mind that either, like getting free turns. Nobody's complaining about free turns, of course. But, like, this is the more, like, platonic ideal for para spam is that you're facilitating for a wall breaker to now become a sweeper because it outspeeds everything. In any case, let's take a look at some of the Smogon sets that Machamp will run. So, Choice Band Machamp, obviously, you know, if you have an attack stat greater than 100, then Smogon is going to slap a Choice Band on you. That's not entirely true, but Machamp is a pretty decent Choice Band user. Cross Chop, HP Ghost, Rock Slide, that's pretty good coverage. That's going to hit most of the tier that you would need to hit. Little bit, you know, not a great move into Skarmory, but then again, what physical attacker is going to have a great move into Skarmory. In any case, you know, I'm kind of over this theme here. We've been listening to it for long enough. Where's a good one here? Let's just listen to some cozy, chill, mystery dungeon music. In any case, yeah, this third or the second move slot, really like more so a fourth move slot. Sleep Talk, Facade, and Focus Punch. It's kind of interesting. So Sleep Talk, yes, you get the idea of guts boosted moves while you're sleep talking them, but Sleep Talk has some weird interactions with Choice Band in this game. I think the idea is that if you sleep talk the first time, you're fine, but then like your move will fail if you try it again. I can't say that I've tried very many Pokemon that have Sleep Talk plus Choice Band, but I know that there's some sort of weird interaction there that makes it really not conducive to try this. But Sleep Talk can be nice if you're trying to use Machamp as a sort of like switch into something like Jinx or Breloom. I don't know if I would switch into Jinx. Just hard with the Machamp. Seems like that could go really badly. But against Breloom could make some sense. Facade, an under talked about move. I think they actually mention it a little bit in this write up here. Let's see. Yeah, so we'll just read this write up and then talk about Facade when it comes up. So Machamp is your slow but strong choice band user with max attack, investment, stab, cross chop. With enough luck to score a critical hit, can Oko, Salamence, and Skarmory. Now, I don't know why there's such a mention of Salamence there. Like, yes, that's good to know, but generally speaking, Salamence is not that worried about coming in on a fighting type move from Machamp, especially because you're getting the Intimidate off. I would be a little bit more concerned about men switching into a Rock Slide from Choice Banded or Machamp, because while you are getting that Intimidate off, you're getting hit with a really rock solid move. No pun certainly intended. So keep that in mind. Guts boosted Focus Punch, perhaps activated by Thunderwave from Blissey or Will-O-Wisp from Weezing. Shout out to Weezing. Will Oko Skarmory as well. That being said, I don't know how commonly you're going to find yourself in a situation where you switch into a Blissey Thunderwave and then Skarmory is going to be the immediate switch, but I guess it could happen, so keep that in mind. Facade is going to deal serious damage to Weezing if you have trouble with it. And then HP Ghost is going to eliminate Gengar and the Psychic types that would switch in. So, yeah, good to know, all of that. Facade, kind of an underrated move. Not very many Pokemon use it. Guts is a little bit inconsistent to get activated. Because there's nothing like a Flame Orb or a Toxic Orb in this generation so that you can get the Guts yourself. But it's not so uncommon to run into a Pokemon that is going to be using the Yellow Magic or Will-O-Wisp or something like that. And Machamp can switch into those. Like, it's surprisingly not a bad switch into a defensive Gengar, like we kind of talked about before, that Thunderbolt only does like in the ballpark of 35%. So, all of that being said, why not do something a little bit more interesting with your Guts, right? The Sleep Talk set. Rest, Sleep Talk, Cross Chop, Rock Slide. You might say that there's a little bit of gambling involved in there because you got that Sleep Talk going into this inaccurate stab move, but you know, we like that here. We're gonna go gambling for sure here. This is in reference here. This visual on the screen. If you don't see it, that's fine. You probably didn't see it when you didn't watch my Heracross video. But this is in reference to the Slot Machine, which is a Heracross set that I can't necessarily take credit for. I'm pretty sure I saw this sort of concept of Rest and Sleep Talk on Heracross from a team that M Dragon built a long time ago. I don't know if this is his exact EV spread, or if he exactly used like Rock Slide as his coverage move, but this is a set that I discussed on my Heracross video, and it's got the same sort of idea where you're going to leverage your bulk, particularly for the case of Machamp, it's slightly higher physical bulk, to go to sleep, and then Sleep Talk some really strong Guts boosted Cross Chops or Rock Slides into your opponent. So, could be nice. I do think that this set has some like obvious issues, like it's not super easy to roll your Cross Chops when you want them, and Cross Chop is pretty inaccurate, but all the things that you think about Heracross doing this can more or less apply to Machamp. Now, I guess I would also say that I'd rather lock into a bug type move than a fighting type move if I could help it. But I mean, there's context where fighting is certainly better. Like if you're trying to hit a steel type, like Metagross. Well, actually, that's a bad example because Metagross is similarly neutral against Bug. I guess if you're trying to hit Skarmory, there you go. So, yeah. But I think really the bread and butter from Machamp, in my opinion, the best set is Bulk Up. And okay, there are some other sets, and I'll briefly mention some ideas that I've heard kicked around from Machamp after we cover this, but we'll get to it. Bulk Up is going to allow you to get a +1 attack and defense boost, which is really nice because if you're familiar with GSC, you might know Machamp using Curse, and I do think I'm pretty sure it still gets Curse in this generation, but Bulk Up is just a straight upgrade for the case of Machamp because it actually does want to have a speed stat, at least a little bit of one, so that it can outspeed Blissey, if nothing else. And Curse is going to compromise that, so that would be a little bit of a barrier to use that. But Bulk Up does not have that drawback, so you can simply just bulk up and get to smashing. Obviously, Cross Chop, Rock Slide, HP, Ghost is like the standard coverage here. We'll see what the Smogon write-up has to say. Machamp has the defenses to set up Bulk Up boost on things such as Snorlax and Tyranitar. Boosted Cross Chop hurts a lot, especially if the Pokemon do not resist it. And HP Ghost is going to put dents into things such as Gengar and Celebi. Rest is a possibility in the last slot, but Machamp doesn't have the special defense to pull off a Curse Lax-like set. So putting EVs into special defense is not really a bad idea, but not necessarily going to save you for doing that sort of bulk up, rest, sweeper concept, you know? Though, I guess I should mention HP Bug is an option. It does say that HP Ghost will put a dent in Celebi, but it's not going to usually threaten to kill Celebi. HP Bug, however, because it's going to do double the damage, times 4 damage total, because Celebi is times 4 weak to it, is going to do a significant amount of damage to Celebi, probably threaten the Oko. But that being said, Celebi is a little bit tougher for Machamp to stay in and click that move against. Celebi is pretty much always going to outspeed you. Like, Celebi would have to literally be throwing its speed to ever get outsped by Machamp. But it also has a pretty strong stab psychic that is threatening to kill Machamp. Now, with this sort of HP investment, you can live that psychic from a 252 Spatak Celebi, but if it goes modest, it's not that consistent anymore. You're going to need even more HP or Spadef investment, and then you're going to be chipping into your speed, which is not ideal. This sort of speed here, 128 exactly, it's not just to balance out the HP and speed, which looks kind of cool, but it's to outspeed a standard Skarmory that's running like 4 speed EVs. So that's the idea. This is the minimum speed that you would need to do that. The 128 HP you would think would be really, really good for Machamp, but it's actually not quite as useful as you would expect. Like, it's not gonna turn like a Metagross Meteor Mash from like a 2-hit KO into a 3-hit KO or something like that. Generally speaking, I guess maybe there's some Metagross sets where potentially that's the case, but yeah, it's going to give you a little bit of support. It's going to help you, like if you take some chip damage, so you get burned or poisoned or something like that, and you would have been put into range if you were uninvested. Now, with this sort of HP investment, you could maybe overcome that, but I don't look at this HP as being like, oh, I'm super tanky and I can just bulk up in front of everything with Machamp, because that's not the case. You can certainly run more HP investment or more defense / Spadef investment if you want to more specifically be able to set up against something. But at the end of the day, like attack and speed are going to be pretty prime for Machamp. And I'm kind of more partial to a little bit of a faster Machamp. So let's take a look at this set. This is running all the way up to 204, which looks like kind of crazy. And also, like, why not just go the full way? Well, my sort of thought is that the set that I'm most interested in outspeeding is Bulky DD Tyranitar. And that's because I'm probably going to use this Machamp in the lead slot. Well, spoilers, I am going to use this Machamp in the lead slot. And this is the fastest Tyranitar that we can hope to outspeed. And Bulky DD Tyranitar is somewhat common in the lead slot. Sometimes you see it in the back, but you will see it in the lead slot pretty commonly, because with the idea that it's going to live a Dugtrio Earthquake and then be able to, I don't know, double edge back, for example. Although not a lot of people like to use double edge on their bulky DD Tar. I kind of like it, but I understand that HP bug is really nice. You may also notice that I did steal 4 EVs from attack in order to accomplish this. Why did I not steal them from HP? We'll talk a little bit about that when I get to the defensive investment. But also, against everything, literally everything other than Blissey, the roll is essentially the same. Blissey does have a very small chance, if it is bold, to live the cross chop. But you're more likely to miss, just in general, than you are to miss the roll. And you're more likely to run into modest Blissey by far than to get the minimum roll on cross chop. So I think that this is a risk worth taking. If you are not into that, if you want the 100% guaranteed OHKO on bold Blissey for some reason, then you can decide whether you want to steal from HP or speed. I mean, that being said, once again though, if it's a bold Blissey, like, what realistically is it going to do to Machamp that makes you, like, really miss out on that KO? I don't think very much. But Cross Chop is going to OHKO Tyranitar, Blissey, and Regice. It is nearly an OHKO on Snorlax and Cloyster. What I mean by that is you're dealing, like, more than 80% to them. So if you have some decent spikes damage onto the Snorlax or the Cloyster, then you could certainly just go for Cross Chop and get the kill. But also that means that if they switch into something like Rock Slide, then you can certainly kill them on follow-up with Cross Chop. So that's good to know. Rock Slide is going to OHKO Moltres and Charizard, and that is just so nice to say. Like, when Donphan, I looked at that and the HP Rock, and even its Rock Slide for the investment that I was trying to run on it, didn't even guarantee the KO on Moltres. I was like, dang, that's sad. Now, granted, I was not running very much attack investment at all. It's kind of apples and oranges to really compare the two, but it is nice to just have a 4 times super effective move that just kills, right? And then we're going to get 2-hit KOs on virtually every other flying type in the tier: Zapdos, Gyarados, Salamence, and Aerodactyl. Of course, Gyarados and Salamence, if they get their Intimidate debuff off on Machamp, then the rolls get a little bit dicier, but just to know that you are doing, like, upwards of 60% to either of them in any case. Potentially more, depending on what their investment is. Hidden Power Ghost, it's very commonly going to one-shot offensive Gengar that runs, like, no HP or defense investment. You're going to 2-hit KO defensive Gengar, Starmie, offensive Celebi, and Metacham. I don't know if, again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you stay in versus offensive Celebi to get that KO, because offensive Celebi, if it's modest, it is straight up going to one-shot your Machamp. If it's not modest, it has rolls to one-shot with Psychic. So, yeah, I don't know if I would do that. And if they just call Mind on you, like, then it's guaranteed that they're going to kill you with Psychic. And they can certainly afford to do that because they're certainly outspeeding Machamp. So, yeah, not so great. The defensive investment is 28 HP. We will live most non-super effective hits guaranteed. Uh, that's not a hard fast rule. I'm sure that there's some insane uh like well, I mean, there are choice banded moves I'm sure that will kill that are not super effective. I'm sure there's some insane uh well, I say that there's got to be some insane move I'm not thinking of that could kill, but like you would live a modest Zapdos T-Bolt. Would you live a modest Moltres Flamethrower? Or a modest Moltres Fire Blast? I guess that's the strongest move that's neutral on the special side. The modest Flamethrower. Yeah, you're certainly living that. Yeah, 86% max. Okay, so Machamp is that dog. He's gonna live a non super effective hit. You're guaranteed to live 2 Jolly Earthquakes from Tyranitar. Now that's not. I don't think that that's guaranteed after the sand damage, but that means that you can switch into a Jolly Earthquake from Tyranitar and then get Earthquaked again and then get your Cross Chop off. Which, all right, you lose your entire Machamp, but they lose their entire Tyranitar. That's not always a terrible trade. It depends on your team. But in any case, the other reason why I want to have 28 HP EVs is that it makes our raw HP 328, which is a multiple of 8. The reason why this matters has to do with sort of how healing is calculated with things like leftovers, or how passive damage is calculated. Most passive damage is going to be a multiple of 4 or a multiple of 8, because you're taking 1/4 or 1/8 or 1/16 or whatever damage. So this means that because damage rounds down, we're going to be up to the next sort of threshold. So if we were at 327, we would get 1 less point of healing from our leftovers than we do if we simply go up to 1 or 328, which can matter, and it can be, helpful from the Machamp. You could also argue that we're going to take 1 extra point of damage from every burn, or every toxic, or every spikes that we step on, or sandstorm. Well, not that it really matters, because leftovers kind of offsets the sandstorm, and that could be an argument maybe that you go down to 327, which maximizes your HP but not taking the extra point of damage from passive areas. So I could certainly see that argument as well. But because I'm showing a team where Machamp is going to be in the lead, and it's not obviously it's not setting its own sand, that extra leftovers maybe is a point of optimization there. But once again, because of that bold Blissey calc, and you could literally just take 4 EVs out of HP, which is arguably better, and put them into the attack, which guarantees now that you would kill that bold Blissey. Maybe there's an argument there, but I fell on the other side of this argument when I built this team and played with it. But ultimately, it's really small potatoes. We're talking about literally 1 HP of damage in either case, which obviously could matter, but chances that it does matter are pretty low. In any case, here's the team, and this has got to be one of the more inventive teams that I've ever played with. And I have to give credit to Disaster Area, who is a content creator, I think. I don't know if they make content anymore, though. At least they did in the past. I will say, as a little bit of a disclaimer, I don't know Disaster Area that well, and I do know that they have been banned on Smogon. I don't know what they got banned for. It could have been just cheating on ladder, or having a bunch of alts on ladder or something like that. I don't know, but I do know that they are banned. So keep that discretion in mind. And disaster area, if you are watching this, I don't know if you want to explain yourself. That's totally fine. I like your team, so I'm gonna talk about it anyway. In any case, I don't know what disaster area called this team, but I've called this team Doom Champ Paraspam. So the sort of idea with this team is you have 2 Wish users in Jirachi and Salamence, and 3 Paralysis spreaders with Jirachi, Starmie, and Tyranitar. And that's going to support the Machamp to break through, like in the end game, turning your wall breaker into a sweeper potentially. Uh, I did make some changes from disaster areas paste of this to sort of more facilitate this paraspam idea. I don't know if disaster area had Thunderwave on their Tyranitar, but I do. So there you go. Lead Machamp is going to scare away DD Tyranitar because otherwise we don't have a great answer to a turn 1 DD from Tyranitar. We don't have well, look at this team. Our rock resist is Jirachi, and Jirachi, of course, is weak to Earthquake, so it's not fantastic. So I'd rather force that Tyranitar to switch, and then if it ever comes in, it's going to have to risk getting paralyzed. Celebi could get a Leech Seed off on it. Salamence could pivot, maybe, and get that Intimidate cycled onto it. There are some options there. It's not like a DD Tyranitar in the back is absolutely going to destroy our team, because most of the Pokemon on this roster here do not allow Tyranitar to set up because they have super effective moves or are threatening paralysis or are doing some other shenanigans. But Machamp is going to be the most effective at getting that Tyranitar to get the hell out of dodge. So that's why we're leading it. It also makes people what the hell? Because Machamp is such an uncommon Pokemon, and leading it is I don't know if I know that team. Which this is the rub here, right? There's going to be a lot of ladder players who see this team and try it out, which means that people are going to know the lead Machamp team. So keep that in mind. You could maybe lead Salamence instead if you want to conceal that idea, but I do think that Machamp gives you a better start versus lead Tyranitar teams. So yeah, keep that all in mind. Celebi, Starmie, and Jirachi are forming a pretty solid defensive core. You wouldn't think so because they're not brutal with it like Blissey and Swampert, and they all share the psychic type, but they don't share any real weaknesses. I mean, I guess Starmie and Celebi are both weak to Ghost and Dark, but that's not the most egregious. And Bug. That's not the most egregious set of things to have common weaknesses on, though. So, and Salamence doesn't hate to switch into a Bug type move, for example. So it's not the worst. Starmie's surprisingly decent into Metagross because I put some defensive investment into it. The particular defensive investment that I have in Starmie is so that it will guarantee that it lives 2 choice banded Earthquakes from Metagross, and not necessarily in Sand, but that is good enough that you can get your T-Wave off, or you can maybe try to recover loop or do any number of nasty things to the Metagross. Get some Surf Chip and do something like that. So that's good to know. And then we have Doom Desire on the Jirachi. This is not a choice banded Doom Desire like I showed in my Doom Desire video, but rather just a sort of bulky Jirachi that has Doom Desire as an option there. That's really nice because Blissey likes to switch into Jirachi a lot of the time. And being able to set up a Doom Desire against Blissey is going to secure some pretty solid damage on something in the future. Now, because we're not attack invested and we're not Choice Banded and all that good stuff. We're not getting the crazy things like OHKOing a Metagross if we set it up on the Blissey. But it is going to do solid damage. If Blissey stays in, it's going to take, I think, 35%, which not enough to really like scare the Blissey, but enough that if I go to something like a Tyranitar, like Machamp, I might not necessarily have to work too hard to pick up that KO. Like Machamp could go for Rock Slide because it's like, well, you're probably switching because your dead is crap to Machamp anyway, and if you stay in, then I'm gonna keep you decently low. Tyranitar also. Can't recall actually if I have Brick Break or something like that on there. Maybe not. In any case, yeah, we do have a lot of special attackers. I think we are even foregoing Brick Break on Salamence with this team. So we are relying on Machamp quite a lot, which is maybe one of the downsides of this team. If you have a sort of situation where Machamp is sacked early, you might be in trouble with dealing with certain defensive Pokemon, like particularly Snorlax and Blissey. But I think you have some options at the very least to try to play into that. Yeah, it's not completely hopeless, but yes, you do need to be careful with this Machamp because it is really, really important. It's a linchpin Pokemon. And wow, we yapped a long time there. We're over an hour, and I haven't even shown any clips yet. But you know what? That's fine because Machamp is worth it. As much as I was making jokes that I hated Machamp in other videos, particularly ones on fighting types. But in any case, we're gonna play some Crystal Colosseum here. You guys love the PBR music. I know you love the PBR music because you keep commenting about the PBR music. And you know what? I love it too. So this first game, very intense. I don't think you've ever seen anything like this. Lead Machamp versus Tyranitar. And that's it. I just won the game. That's really funny. I choose to believe that my opponent saw the lead Machamp and said, what do I do? Where's my switch in? And then they spent the whole timer trying to figure out what they were going to do. Now, granted, probably they queued up the game, took a BKC style bathroom break, and then came back and saw, oh shit, I just lost a game. And I hope that they came back and they saw a lead Machamp and that they just lost to that and they were like, what the hell? But okay, I understand. You guys want something more substantial. You want something that you can sink a little bit more of your teeth into, right? That makes sense. So we'll show you a much more substantial replay here. Lead Tyranitar versus lead Machamp. And I cross chop and kill the Tyranitar. And then my opponent sends an Aerodactyl. And then forfeits the game. What can I say, man? Like these Tyranitar players with their staying in on the Machamp think that they're gonna do something. Like, come on, man. And this is a sort of an argument for why you run so much speed on Machamp. Now, it's possible that this was a really slow Tyranitar. It possibly could have been a minus speed Tyranitar for all I know. But chances are that Tyranitar had a little bit of speed investment in the lead slot. At the very least, like, enough to outspeed a defensive Swampert. And while we could certainly run a lot less speed on Machamp and still outspeed that, it's possible that this could have been a bulky DD Tyranitar, thought it could have outsped and done something, maybe, I don't know, and I killed it. Or maybe my opponent was just like, you know what? It's so obvious that they would go for cross chop. They're not going for cross chop. No, come on, man. I'm not making. You think I was born yesterday? I'm not doing that. All right. I've played with Hariyama in the lead. Okay. I know how this goes. These Tyranitar think they can stay in versus the fighting type, and no, I'm not letting you do that. I'm not freaking Metacham going for Focus Punch with a Choice Band and all that BS. So, in any case, I swear these next games are not going to be so quick. This is a really cool avatar here. 1526 gamer with a top 100 rating in Gen 9 doubles OU. I know you can't really see that, but that's what it says. So probably a decent player here. Lead Skarmory. So against Lead Skarmory, I tend to like to just bulk up because they're going to spike. And then if I go for Cross Chop and crit, I would just kill the Skarmory. But also, I could just miss. So that's fair. And in any case, I get Tyranitar in, who will go for a Fire Blast into a switch into Flygon, and I get the burn. So, yeah, I missed that Cross Chop. That's pretty bad for me. But that burn on Flygon, that's pretty damn good. I'm not going to lie. So, Skarmory Flygon, to me, is indicating a Superman team. Not always Superman, but generally these are the two Pokemon that make that archetype work. So, could make some sense. In any case, I get a Leech Seed on Skarmory, which allows me to go to Starmie. Blissey is the switch in, which is a pretty good switch into Starmie, but I am going to just Rapid Spin. I might take a Thunderbolt or something like that, but instead my opponent goes for Aromatherapy, which brings their Flygon back into this game. So pretty nice from them. Then I go to Machamp as I get hit with a Seismic Toss. So this could be a Mono Blissey, potentially faster than Machamp, but probably not. In any case, I am going for HP Ghost, trying to catch something like a Gengar switching in, thinking that they could do something cheeky there. I knew that I was probably not going to be able to KO the Skarm, or I was going to need to bulk up on the Protect, which is a great play by me, honestly. Come on now. And then I go for Cross Chop into a Moltres revealed, but I get the critical hit, which puts it into Dead to Sandstorm range. So that's really nasty. And this is what I'm saying is like a +1 Machamp, a +1 Paralyzed Machamp is really scary to switch into. And yeah, that Paralysis, probably not good for the Zapdos. Now, it's possible that if this was an offensive Zapdos that I would have just killed anyway, but if it was a defensive Zapdos, that Paralysis actually just put it into range to certainly die there because of Guts. And this Machamp has killed a Moltres and a Zapdos. It has done a decent amount of damage to Skarmory. I'm pretty satisfied with that. I'm just going to stay in and go for Cross Chop because I'm certainly going to kill Skarmory if it stays in. And it's going to force it to Drill Peck. If it didn't have Drill Peck in the last slot, he would have lost another Pokemon. But granted, I mean, you're not going to Skarmory if you don't have Drill Peck there. I go to Jirachi and try to hit a Thunder on the Skarmory. I miss. And then they reveal last month Misdreavus. Interesting. So this is a Misdreavus Superman team, which is generally more on the stally side. But I eliminated the two Pokemon that put the offensive pressure on. So, I think I can weather this storm. So Misdreavus is very commonly going to be like a mean look, Perish Trapper type of Misdreavus, but since this one goes for Thunderbolt there, I think this is probably actually a Calm Mind Misdreavus. In any case, Starmie takes that pretty easily, and then I can just recover. And that Paralysis is going to be really nice for me later into this game, potentially, as I could go to certain Pokemon and just stall out this Misdreavus and prey on the free turns that I get from Paralysis. I will just spin there. Nothing that they can do. If they go to Misdreavus, alright, I'm going to Surf, and then you're going to be at lower HP. This Blissey is going to stay in an Ice Beam on my Celebi as I go for Leech Seed, so it is not a Mono Blissey. Probably just that standard Cleric type Blissey with Aromatherapy, 2 attacks, and Soft Boil. But in any case, I can go for Body Slam into the Flygon switch. I am going to opt to stay in because this is a defensive Flygon, and I know I can take an Earthquake decently well. And then if I can get the Body Slam para here, then I can, fish for some free turns, do some nasty stuff. Salamence was a decently safe switch there. Even if they went for Rock Slide, I would have been okay. If they went for not Thunder, what am I trying to say? Toxic, that would have been pretty bad, but I don't think you're going for Toxic into Jirachi in that case. I go for Doom Desire on Blissey to try to force some progress. Instead, Misdreavus comes out, but Misdreavus doesn't have a fantastic defense stat either, so this is going to force some decent damage at some point. I am going to go for Body Slam on the Skarmory because that's just enough damage that I could maybe keep it in Doom Desire range. In fact, I didn't need that, and I could have fished for a cheeky Para, but that's something really important to know. I don't know if my opponent knew that. Protect does not stop Doom Desire. So that Skarmory, it was dead to rights. And when he lost the Skarmory, that kind of just sealed the game there. Yeah, Flygon could maybe do something, or Flygon plus Blissey could maybe do something, but it's just going to be too hard to switch around my Jirachi and Salamence, and you're just not making much progress. I can just switch forever. I can be pretty safe with my wishes. You're not going to be able to do much. Eventually, you're going to run out of PP if you try to play this out. So my opponent will forfeit there. I was actually kind of lower on the ladder at this stage, but my opponent was decent at least, so we'll take that. Next game, Machamp versus a lead Salamence. So that's probably one of the worst leads I could have seen. I'm going to have to switch, and I go to Jirachi on a Metagross, who goes for Hidden Power Fire as I Thunder into it. Interesting, mixed Metagross. I'm going to Wish because that's going to keep me healthy. And then I'm just going to go for Body Slam, try to para that Swampert. But instead they go to a Snorlax. This is looking a lot like a physical offense team. So I'm expecting to see something like a Magneton in the back, potentially Suicune. But in any case, it is what it is. I pivot into Tyranitar there, predicting them to go for a normal type move. Because they revealed Body Slam, I figured that Focus Punch was a decent possibility. So I am going to just accept that I got my Sandstorm up and then switch to Celebi, who should take a Focus Punch or an Earthquake pretty well. And it does happen to be Focus Punch. The Snorlax does get fully parried, but that's not so consequential because Focus Punch does not do that much to my Celebi. I'll go for Leech Seed as it booms. Not ideal, but honestly, Snorlax was going to be a little bit of a problem for my team. It's one less Pokemon that I need to handle with my Machamp, so it's kind of good. I get a Paralysis off on the mixed Metagross here, and because I know it's mixed, I'm going to switch to Jirachi. If they go for Hidden Power Fire, bravo, I'm just going to Wish up. But I figured that Explosion was going to be pretty likely, given that they were paralyzed, and Jirachi is going to eat that up, so very nice for me. We'll get a little bit of chip healing so that we're back above 50%, and then we'll have to switch against the Salamence. It does reveal to be a mixed Mence, which is not so bad for my Starmie. I might take an HP Grass, but anticipating that my opponent is not going to want to allow this Salamence to get paralyzed, because then he's looking really, really tough into an unrevealed Tyranitar moveset and Machamp. So I go for Surf, anticipating that they would want to switch to Swampert, and I do a lot of damage there. So this is looking like an offensive Swampert. I am just going to stay in and get my next Surf off. I'll take that Earthquake for less than 50% because Starmie is a beast, and then kill off that Swampert. Now, here comes the Zapdos. And I want you to think about this for a moment here. What would you do if you were up against the Zapdos here? So, many of you are probably thinking, switch to Jirachi, switch to Tyranitar. In my mind, that's not the best sort of play here. I don't have a dedicated switch into Zapdos anymore now that my Celebi is dead. And that's a sort of a flaw of this team, I guess you could say. So, like, I don't have a great switch. Jirachi's not a great switch because I'm at 54%. So if this is a strong enough Zapdos, switching into a Thunderbolt is just going to sack this Jirachi off here. And I think that I could get a lot more use out of this Jirachi, depending on what this last is. If it's something that I can wish against, then I'm really nice. Tyranitar, not really worth sacking the HP on it, and then I don't have Rock Slide or Ice Beam, so if they call me on that, I'm kind of screwed. So, I'm actually going to stay in and Thunder Wave, and that's the reason why I do that, is because it gives my Machamp impetus to come in on the revenge kill and threaten to kill this with Rock Slide. And depending on what this last is, it might not be able to switch into Machamp, and I might be able to force some damage on Salamence, or maybe just kill the Zapdos as long as I can hit my Rock Slides. But my opponent instead opts to go for Thunder Wave here into my Starmie, so I actually get to keep my Starmie here, and because I get to keep my Starmie, I am just going to switch and go straight to Machamp, who should take a Thunderbolt well enough. As long as I can hit a Rock Slide, I'm okay with that. And I get a full para, so that's really nice for me. They have to get through the flinch and the paralysis to do anything to my Machamp, and they don't. So, like, this just worked out perfect. Now, I guess you could argue, maybe that wasn't the best play. If I get Thunderbolt, crit, or Paralyze here, then I lose my sort of win condition. Maybe I should have went to Tyranitar instead. But, I mean, that's fair. That is probably a better play. But it worked out for me. And yeah, so I'll go to Jirachi on this, sack it off to a Fire Blast, which is fine. That means I can get my Tyranitar in, who takes a Brick Break, and I will Thunder Wave this. So my opponent is probably like, oh, what the hell? Because pretty much everything on this team got paralyzed. I go for Pursuit, which would guarantee damage on this if it switches out. It does just get a little bit of damage in general, and I think it's probably my best damaging move because I have, like, Hidden Power Grass and Fire Blast is my coverage. And that is enough that my Rock Slide is going to kill here. So that's great. Last Mon, Tyranitar. That is exactly what you do not want to have last Mon versus a Machamp. They do not get their Rock Slide flinch, and I just kill them with Cross Chop. So I say GG, they don't say GG. I guess I could understand that, because Paraspam is pretty tough to deal with. But you know what? This team's too damn cool. We're gonna have to roll with it. Stormcrow, pretty good player. Some player who often finds themselves in the 1700s. At this stage, they were a little lower on the ladder, but I recognize game. So in any case, a lead Tyrannosif. Again, and then Salamence. So, because I respect Stormcrow as a player, I'm not going to click Cross Chop into this Tyranitar. Yes, it would make some sense, and yes, I've done it in the past, and as you've seen in a few replays ago, it pays off really nicely if that Tyranitar stays in. But come on, most players are not going to stay in there. So I go for Rock Slide, anticipating that they would go to something like a Salamence or a Zapdos, and it was a Salamence, so I get some really nice chip there. I could stay in and go for another Rock Slide, and then they could maybe die to Sand, but it's not really worth risking the Machamp HP for that. So I'm actually just going to switch to Jirachi, who is going to invite in the Skarmory, who has no item. I go for Thunder, and they get full paralyzed. I will land my Thunder this time as they go for Thief on my Jirachi. Alright, fair enough, but I think that's okay. Jirachi is one of the more acceptable Pokemon on this team to get Thiefed. And to get that much damage on the Skarmory, that's so worth it. They go to Blissey, trying to force me out, and go for Toxic as I just stay in and get my Doom Desire off. And then I can simply go for Body Slam as that's just going to threaten Para on anything. Tyranitar comes in, reveals to be a Lumberry Tyranitar. So that's kind of fine with me. My Doom Desire misses. I end up going for a Wish there, thinking that they might not want to stay in for some reason. I don't know. Could have made some sense if I had a really solid Rock Resist to switch in, like say like a Swampert, but I didn't. So I am kind of scratching my head at that play a little bit. Okay, maybe I was anticipating that they would want to switch. Because they had burned their Lumberry, but instead they're going to try to go for game here. I can't really... Gonna have to just play for the Body Slam para and then, like, maybe pivot around with my Salamence if that doesn't work. But because I get that para, I am gonna go to my Tyranitar, who is fairly expendable. Yes, they probably went for Earthquake there, and yes, they would have gotten a kill on my Tyranitar there, but I figured that my full health Tyranitar is probably not that helpful in this matchup, because this looks like, to me, like a team that I like to call Big 4, which is Big 5, but you replace the Gengar with Salamence, and then your 6th Pokemon is Metagross. And this Tyranitar is not going to be all that great into that sort of structure. In any case, I will come in versus this Tyranitar, hit my HP Grass, and then die. Alright, fair enough. Which is kind of good for me because it allows me to go to Salamence, and I can get the kill with Salamence rather than going into Machamp, who probably is a little easier to switch into. In any case, Blissey is going to be the switch in, and as I can go to Jirachi. Because they revealed Toxic, I know that they don't have a great move to hit Jirachi. Maybe they have Flamethrower or Fire Blast, but whatever. They're not clicking that into a Salamence. Maybe they would, I don't know. But in any case, I do call this team pretty much right that they do have a Metagross here. And because they revealed to be leftovers, I am going to try to get my paralysis off on this. They're not going to want to let me do that, so they're going to go to Blissey. It's a little bit of an interesting play here. I'm going to go to Jirachi. It's the safest option. As they reveal Thunderbolt, so they're actually Toxic Bolt Beam, which is probably the worst case scenario against this particular Jirachi. And they're going to reveal last as Claydol, actually, rather than Swampert. Sensible. Still have 2 Rock Resist. Perfectly fine. And this is a bulky Metagross, so I guess it makes sense that you would rather have Claydol for spin support. In any case, knowing that this has got to be a mixed Ments, I am going to pivot to the Starmie there. And now Starmie is threatening to T-Wave the Salamence, so obviously the Salamence does not want to stay in. So they're going to switch to Blissey, and anticipating that exact play, I am going to double to Machamp, and now I'm getting a kill here. Maybe not. If they call me out correctly, they could avoid a kill, but they go to Metagross, who would have been a relatively safe Pokemon. I was happy to get Cross Chop damage, but I crit, which puts them into dead to the next Cross Chop range, which is fantastic for me. They get Salamence in, who takes some Cross Chop damage, which is perfectly fine because it's getting even lower. I'll go to Jirachi on a Dragon Dance or Dragon Claw, and I know that I can take a Flamethrower pretty decently, actually. So I will go for Body Slam. I do get the para, which is really nice because that means now I just kill this Salamence. If I got a slightly higher roll, it would have just died to Sand, but in any case, that's fine with me. They do go to Blissey there, but I feel like that's not a fantastic play because I can just get my Doom Desire off. I go for Cross Chop and miss on the Blissey as it goes for Toxic, and like, whoa, that's a crazy play. Because now I have a Guts boosted Cross Chop, which will guarantee a kill on Skarmory. Metagross is going to come in. It's going to take the Doom Desire, and that's going to kill. And now Blissey is just, I mean, this thing is dead. So, yeah. I mean, granted, I don't know if they had very many better plays in that sort of situation. But, yeah, look at that. Like, Machamp went stupid mode. And yes, things like a critical hit on that Metagross were definitely super helpful for me. But, like, I still have my Starmie who can recover up on the Metagross. If Metagross goes for Boom on Starmie, I still have resources to win this game. As long as I can get a Body Slam para on Ments in that case. Which, I will say, you will find some situations with this team where, like, your only out is to get the paralysis with Jirachi, and 60% of the time that works out for you, but the other 40% of the time it does not, so not so great. U equals 444%, 4% NAB. I think we've seen this player before. And you know what that means. It's going to be a Ninjask team. And I'm just going to preface this. I'm not going to show me losing to Ninjask because fuck Ninjask players. So we get to enjoy a little beatdown here. They actually pass to Heracross as I go for a Rock Slide. Probably my best click into Heracross coming in. But since it is a Heracross, I am going to go to Salamence, who gets an Intimidate off. At the very least, could maybe live a Rock Slide if it didn't crit. My Jirachi is defensive enough to live a Mega Horn, and I'm going to have to play for the Body Slam Para in this instance. So, same sort of thing that I was just talking about is sometimes you have to play for that. And yeah, I was going to sack my Jirachi, and I figured that the best possible thing that I could do was to set up a Doom Desire so I could get some extra damage on something else after I kill this Heracross with Fire Blast. But I actually don't quite get enough damage on it, which is really scary. But they get full parried, and then they die to sand, which is a relief for me. They go to Ninjask here, who I can just break the substitute with, and then they're going to take a Doom Desire here, which puts them at such an HP range that they can never ever go for substitute again. So that's quite fine with me. I go for Hidden Power Grass, trying to catch a potential switch to Marowak, but instead I catch a switch to Suicune and I get a critical hit. Very nice, because now this Suicune is going to be threatened by the Celebi. What do I do here? I go for Leech Seed, actually, which is probably sensible. I'm not going to get the kill on the Suicune unless I crit with HP Grass of my own. But getting that Leech Seed means that Suicune is now on a timer, and if it's a mono Suicune, then I can just stall it out kind of with Celebi. They go to their own Celebi. Makes sense on a team like this. You are extending the baton pass chain. But I'm going to go for Perish Song, because I know that this Celebi is probably a baton pass Celebi, and I want to have it not baton pass. So, yeah, if you don't know, Perish Song does get passed if you use baton pass on it. So, yeah. In any case, I want to break the sub, and I don't have a great move to hit just anything that's coming in, so I will go for Pursuit. They do opt to switch on that turn, so kind of funny that that substitute takes the damage and dies, but not very consequential. Snorlax comes in. I am going to switch to Starmie in this case. Reason being is I want to get a Thunder Wave off and paralyze the Snorlax, and you might say that doesn't really make a lot of sense because Snorlax is already really slow, but it does make sense from the perspective that you want this Snorlax to maybe not get all of its moves off. And there we go, we do get a full para there. I can go for Perish Song with my Celebi, which is going to force the Snorlax to switch. I will just recover spam against this. If they get a critical hit, alright, that sucks for me, but they have to get it through the paralysis, so like chances are pretty well in my favor. I am going to go for another recover there. I have a basically full health Celebi. As the Ninjask comes in, I can simply go to Tyranitar, who dodges a Toxic. Dude, I'm lucking the crap out of this guy, but you know what? I don't care. You're using 30 Ninjask, so... And I know what people will say is like, oh, Ninjask is a legitimate strategy. It's a part of the game. You have to learn how to play around it. Yes, okay, all of these things are true, but it doesn't make it any less annoying to play around it. It doesn't mean that I don't hate the players who use it any less. Okay, I don't hate the players. I hate the game. I just hate Pokemon. This is the core tenet of every Pokemon player in actuality. Since this Snorlax is paralyzed and does not have any boosts other than speed, which is irrelevant, I can go to Celebi and just get a nice solid Leech Seed off on it. I do switch to Machamp, thinking that I might be able to do something nasty to the Snorlax, but Ninjask comes in. Knowing that it's going to go for Protect, I just go for a boost. and they go for Toxic. I guess thinking maybe that I would try to boost again. But nah, fuck that. I'm killing that Ninjask every opportunity I get. Except the opportunities where it's very obvious that it's going to go for Protect. But now I am Guts boosted +1, so like there's not going to be a great switch in for this. This player is going to have to game to not lose a Pokemon here. But instead of allowing my Machamp to just take a fuck ton of damage versus a Celebi here, I'm going to just switch to my own Celebi, get the Parasong off, force the Celebi to switch. They're going to just hard switch to Suicune as I get my Recover off. That's fine by me. I have 2 more turns, so I can go for a Leech Seed here. And then I can switch. I don't know who I'm going to switch to, actually. Maybe Machamp. Yeah, that makes sense, because this hasn't burned a turn of sleep yet. Or it only burned 1 turn of sleep, and I will get some recovery. And then I can go for a Guts-boosted Cross Chop into whatever I want. And it's going to be a Snorlax. Great for me. Celebi is in. Okay, we're going to be in the same sort of situation. So I'm just going to go to my own Celebi. They substitute. Alright, Coolio. I am running out of Parasongs, but like, I'm not running out of them that fast. They do pass this substitute to their Suicune, which, again, a little bit questionable because they are going to perish in 3, but I am just going to stay in with my Celebi, because why not? They go for Rest, which, alright, fair enough. They're going to be at full HP, and they're probably going to switch here. So I'm going to go to Tyranitar, trying to anticipate the Celebi switch, but I guess they call that and stay in to burn the extra turn. But whatever, I'm just going to Fire Blast on the very obvious Celebi switch, and I get the burn, which means that this Celebi, it's not going to be long for this world. I go for Pursuit because I know I will kill it at this range if it ever switches out. I could kill it again if it switches out. That's fine. And now I'm going to go for a Fire Blast. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not on this turn. That's fine. This is still dead to switch it out to Pursuit range. But because it's getting up there, I guess I keep just going for Pursuit there. Maybe I'm banking on a critical hit at some point. But I know that this Celebi at that stage could have just not clicked Recover, assuming that I would go for Pursuit and do something else. So I am going to go for a Fire Blast, which is going to put this Celebi back in range of an unswitched out Pursuit. I'm going to go for another Fire Blast here, which is, again, putting the Celebi pretty low. How many recovers? 23? I mean, you can still stall my Tyranitar out, but I am going to just go for another Fire Blast, and I happen to land all 3 of those, which means that the Celebi is going to die to the burn there, which is fine. Yeah, the Celebi was stalling some PP on me, that's fine, but I could always go to my own Celebi, force that thing to switch with a Parasong. I only have 3 more, but that's fine. Parasong on this Suicune is really nice because it's going to force this Unrevealed to have to come in, and we're going to see what it is. I think it's a Marowak. So I am going to go to Starmie, but it actually is a Magneton, which maybe is not good for me. But I go for Thunder Wave into the Magneton to allow for my Machamp to basically win the game. But they go for a Substitute, which is like Christmas morning for that play. I go for Surf just to break the Substitute, and even more Christmas morning, they get full parried. I don't really care about my Starmie at this stage. Like, they can kill it for all I care, because I have so many other Pokemon that just smash this Magneton. I am going to go for Pursuit, anticipating them to switch out, and I don't quite get the kill. And then Suicune is in. Magneton comes back in as I hard switch to Celebi. Alright, fine. Don't really care, because Magneton is just going to die, and if they switch to Suicune, they're going to take a super effective Hidden Power Grass. They go for Calm Mind, they're dead, and that's what they do. Granted, if they went for Rest, they were also dead, because I just would have 3-hit KO'd them. And yeah, that was a pretty academic game. Yes, I acknowledge that I got some pretty nice paralysis luck throughout that game. But you know what? I don't care. That's what you get for being a Ninjask player. Alright, last game against Stash Pot here. He's got a kind of interesting avatar. I think that's Steven Stone from Pokemon Masters. I'm wrong about that. Correct me. Alright. Executor. This is probably the longest that I've spent on a turn 1. maybe ever. On a ladder game. I was like, what is an Executor going to do in the lead slot? And my sort of thought was that it's probably going to Sunny Day, but if it has Psychic, that could be really dangerous because that is threatening to kill my Machamp. But I took a look at the rolls and it's like, well, this has to be a pretty decently invested Executor to not just straight up die to Hidden Power Ghost. And if I had Hidden Power Bug, I certainly kill. So it's like, would an Executor stay in here? And also, Executor naturally speed ties Machamp. And then it's a question of, are they going to run a max speed Executor? Maybe. I don't know. There was a lot of things to juggle here, but my opponent turned the timer on. I even ticked down to 120 seconds there, and I decide I'm just going to take my HP Ghost. And I get a critical hit and kill, so that was pretty easy there, I guess. I'm so curious what the Executor was going to do, but glad we didn't have to find out the hard way. In any case, Jirachi is going to come in. I'm going to Wish, and I'm going to try to smack this Suicune with a Thunder. At the very least, put it down into range where I can force an early rest. Celebi can come in and get the Leech Seed off, and I get Ice Beamed. Oh no, it does 37% whole to me. I mean, that's not nothing, of course, but that's fine. I can go for Perish Song. As Metagross switches in, I will go to Starmie, who takes a fat Earthquake. Okay, you know what? This made me realize. I think I said I would live 2 Choice Banded Earthquakes with Starmie. That was a god dang lie. I would live 2 Adamant Earthquakes from an unboosted Metagross. Not a Choice Banded Metagross. So, those of you who have already corrected me in the comments section, I have farmed your engagement. Alright, we will continue on. I am kind of going to recover loop this because this Metagross would have to stay in and basically die in order to kill my Starmie. So, anticipating that they're not going to want to let their whole banded Metagross just die, I will go to down to their last turn, and then I will go for Thunder Wave to catch whatever switches in, and I catch Snorlax. Again, people will say, does this really matter? Snorlax is already so slow, but, like, shit matters when you have to hit a Cross Chop to kill it. Alright? So, I go to Jirachi, and I get Body Slam parried myself. Not great. I go for Thunder, anticipating either Metagross or Suicune to want to switch in, but instead Snorlax is just going to stay. I get paralyzed on a turn where I try to go for a Wish, which is really not good for me. And then I decide, well, if I only get one more move, I might as well go for Doom Desire. And yes, I know that Snorlax has a decent HP stat, but it's not a fantastic, it has a decent defense stat, but it's not fantastic, so it's going to get a little bit of chip on whatever switches in. And I can simply go to my Machamp, who's going to force a switch out here. I get Cross Chop on Charizard for a pretty solid amount of damage. I know I would live a Fire Blast, so I'm going to just eat that and Rock Slide. As Dugtrio is the switch, takes a Doom Desire for 54 whole percent. Not the most devastating, but that's fine. I go to Salamence on Dugtrio, threatening to Dragon Dance, but of course I don't have Dragon Dance, so I go for a Flamethrower or Fire Blast trying to hit the Metagross. Because I sort of figured that if Suicune is the switch, then it's not the worst case scenario. Celebi is pretty good into it. I miss my Leech Seed, which sucks. I'm going to have to go for Recover because a switch to Dugtrio would devastate me. But now I'm going to Leech Seed. They're just playing for freeze, I guess. I'm going to recover. I end up getting a full health Celebi out of this. Anticipating that this Metagross does not want to go for Boom, I am just going to go for Leech Seed to get some chip. And then I'm going to go to Starmie as they switch to Snorlax. Alright, fair enough. I'll get my recover off. I get Parrot here, but that's not so consequential because I have Natural Cure and I can just switch to Tyranitar now. This sand is going to be really important for limiting this Snorlax and this Suicune going into the end game. And now I kind of see what this is. This is like a mixed offense team with a Dugtrio trap, and you have Exeggutor as a weather clear idea, which is really, really cool if that's what this is. I mean, it might be something different, but no, I actually think that's awesome. I go for a Thunder Wave into the Suicune, who just Ice Beams my Tyranitar. Kind of nice for me, as I can go for Hidden Power Grasses, and I'm threatening the 3-hit KO, which is really important. I sort of figure there's not much of a reason for me to switch out, because I might just straight up kill this Suicune as long as I don't get full Parrot. My opponent is not going to risk that, unfortunately, on the turn that I do get full Parrot. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean I would have necessarily got full Parrot if they stayed in. I don't know how RNG is calculated in Pokemon, if it's like literally predetermined per side, or if they like roll through numbers or whatever. So I don't know. But it does feel bad. If they stayed in and I missed, then they could have rested again. But then again, they're forced into that sort of rest loop unless I get Parrot twice out of 3 turns. So it's not fantastic for them. In any case, the Suicune is coming in. It's going to have to burn another turn of sleep, which allows me to go to Mence. I have Hidden Power Grass, so I can just kill the Suicune if it stays in, and that's exactly what happens. Lax is going to come in, and I'm going to set up a Wish as I get Shadow Balled. Okay? Definitely not the end of the world for me there. I can go to Celebi, who should take a Shadow Ball decently well enough. I get Spadef dropped, okay, doesn't really matter. And then I can just kind of recover loop on this Snorlax if I so choose. But I will go for a Leech Seed first. Covers a Metagross switch pretty well. So yeah, good for me. I go for Recover because I will just loop that Metagross. Go for a Leech Seed here. Now I will switch to Starmie, who will take a Meteor Mash and die. That's not great, but I can go to Celebi, and I just save myself some a potential crit chance, I should say. I will just recover, because my sort of game plan here is to run this Metagross out of moves, or not exactly, but run it out of HP using Leech Seed, because I should be taking a little enough damage that this is okay. Snorlax is going to Body Slam twice into my Celebi. I go for a Hidden Power Grass just to get some chip on it. Metagross is now going to be the switch. See, the thing is, this Snorlax cannot, if it has Self-Destruct as its last move, which most likely it does, it cannot afford to go for it into my Celebi, because I have a Salamence with Fire Blast, and this Metagross is too low to take that Fire Blast, so if they play for Boom onto Celebi, then 85% of the time they're just going to lose this game. So they can't really afford to do that. I go for Leech Seed and Metagross booms. Alright, fair enough. My Mence is in. I get the Intimidate off on Snorlax, and I should be able to 2-hit KO it. Or 3-hit KO it, I should say, with Dragon Claw. They go for Body Slam. They don't get the Para. If this gets full Parrot here, I win. If they go for Body Slam and they don't crit, I win. But they go for Self-Destruct. Alright. And then they get the tie there, which is fine. GG's all around. That was a really close and a really well-played game, I think, on both sides. Maybe that turn 1 HP Ghost into the Exeggutor might not have been a good play. I don't know. I got the critical hits, so it didn't punish me. But yeah, all around decent. I could have maybe, I think, I mean, the thing is, like, I can't really call the Metagross Boom with with Salamence, because then this Snorlax would just boom, right? We're kind of in the same situation. I don't know actually if Celebi would live a Snorlax self-destruct at full HP. My inkling is that it doesn't, but yeah, kind of interesting endgame there. I could have tried to save my Starmie so that we didn't have to play for that. I think, in fact, sacking the Starmie to that Metagross going for Meteor Mash was probably not a great play. I could have just stayed in with the Celebi and recover loop. But I did think that there was a possibility that I could lose to a last mon Snorlax if they boomed my Celebi. So, this is things to think about. Although, I think with the moves revealed, it was very unlikely that I would lose to last mon Lax. But in any case, Tide does benefit me because my opponent had more elo at the time that we played this game, so I will take that 2 points to the bank. This has been almost 2 hours of Machamp gaming. This is such a cool team. Again, credit to Disaster Area for coming up with this team. I assume that they came up with it on their own. They have a lot of other teams with Doom Desire Jirachi, if you're sort of interested in that. You go searching for it. But yeah, really cool. I do have a slight iteration on this team because one of the things that I realized is that this team is pretty tough into Suicune. In particular, this sort of game here where you have a Suicune and a Dugtrio. If this Dugtrio successfully trapped my Celebi, what really do I have to stop Suicune from just Calm Minding up and winning the game? And I sort of looked at that as being a bit of a problem, so I did make some changes here to make that team a little bit more resilient. Will I release that team in a video at some other point? Maybe. But maybe I might just keep it for myself. Who knows? I'm going to be stingy with my teams. I don't know. I think a part of the rub of being a content creator in this way, where I reveal all my teams, is well, if I have a really cool team and I want to bring that to tournament, that is now an open team sheet for my opponent if they know about my YouTube channel, which I'm not saying that I'm a massive YouTuber by any means, but I'm going to guess that more ADV players know about my YouTube than don't at this stage. So, yeah. I do think about that as maybe a potential ceiling on my sort of tournament play, but also at the same time, I have a lot of room to grow as a player before I really try to play for tournament wins of any real capacity. So, am I really sacking my chances of winning by revealing teams? Probably not. And there are a lot of really good players, take the Linear Curve, for example, who have done team dumps and probably still use teams from their team dumps. So, if they can, if the Linear Curve can get by with that, then I ought to try as well. Now, granted, yes, the Linear Curve is a much better player than I am, but I'm not going to use this as an excuse for my bad playing in tournament. All this to being said is I did use a team that a similar team to this in tournament. If you can find the replay, I think it's public, so you can figure out what I did. But yeah, it didn't pan out so well for me. In any case, that has been the Machamp team. I hope that this has been really eye-opening and cool, and I could have farmed Replay of the Week with this. But, I don't know if I want to farm Replay of the Week, basically stealing another player's idea, so it's going to become a video instead. In any case, I hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you for the next one.